Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Inside Legends. The date is Sunday, February 1st, 2026. Happy first day of February. And today we're going to be talking about my 2026 Senate prediction as of course, February 1st, 2026. I do one of these predictions at the very beginning of every single month. And yeah, let's just get straight into it. So, for the Senate prediction, what we're going to do is we're going to label each state by the margin that I predict are going to be won by each respective party. For example, safe states are going to be states won by their respective parties by either Democrats or Republicans by 15 or more points. For example, Oregon would be one of those, but for the Democratic Party, Democrats are going to win the state of Oregon in 2026 by about 15 points in the midterms. The next state I'm going to label as is Colorado. Colorado is a little bit more interesting. In 2024, it went to Kamala Harris by 11 points. On the Senate level, it went in 2022, went to the Democratic candidate by a little bit under 15 points, by 14.6. In 2020, it went to the Democrat by 10 points. In 2026, it should go to the Democratic Party by roughly 15 points. There's a chance it's dipped slightly under. It could be like 14.9 margin, but at the end of the day, I'm going to label Colorado as a safe state. The next states we're going to talk about, the next safe state for the Democratic Party is going to be the state of Illinois, followed by Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Delaware. And these are all states, there's not too much about them. They're safe Democratic states. Democrats win these states by large margins. They're going to be won on the Senate level by Democrats in 2026 by over 15 points. And now there are more. There is one more, actually, and that's the state of Minnesota. Minnesota, yes, is typically a redder state. Harris only won the state by 4 points. However, on the Senate level, in the same ballot that Kamala Harris was winning Minnesota by 4 points, on the Senate level, it went to the Democratic candidate by 16 points. And that's because Royce White is running in the Senate race. Royce White, the Republican, he's a very, very unpopular Republican. And he is set to get the nomination for Minnesota Senate yet again in 2026. Nobody's challenging him. No one substantial is challenging him. Challenging him in the Republican primary. He's going to be the nominee. He's extremely unpopular. He's going to lose by an even larger margin than he did in 2024. I expect this to even be close to a 20-point margin for the Democratic Party in 2026. And now that is it for the safe states. You might notice New Jersey is missing, and Virginia and New Hampshire. We'll talk about those later and why I do not believe that those will be safe states. And next are the safe states for the Republican Party. Once again, these are states that are going to be won by their respective parties, this time for the Republican Party, by 15 or more points. These are states like Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, not Kansas. I'll talk about Kansas more later, but Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. I can talk a little bit more about Alabama in a minute. And Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and not South Carolina. That's where this stands. Yes, you might notice that I'm leaving out the states of Kansas and South Carolina. You could arguably put these in the safe column for the Republican Party, but in 2020, they only went on the Senate level to the Republican Party by 10 points and 11 points respectively. On the presidential level in 2026, they're both safe states. Yes, Donald Trump won South Carolina by 18 points and Kansas by 16. I predict these states are going to shift left by more than 1 point and 2 points respectively to make these states below that 15-point margin for the Republican Party. And the reason I said about Alabama is because Doug Jones is running. Wait, never mind. Forget what I said about Alabama. Doug Jones is running for governor. That's a whole other story. Forget everything I said about Alabama. This is the current map so far. These are states going to be safe for the Republican Party and safe for the Democratic Party. And now we're going to move on to the states that are likely. Likely states are states that are going to be won by their respective parties by 5 to 15 points. These are the states that are going to be won solidly for their respective parties, but just not by that 15-point margin that these safe states are won by. For example, New Mexico. New Mexico is going to go to the Democratic Party. There's no doubt in my mind, or anybody's mind for that matter, that New Mexico is going to go to the Republican Party. It's just not going to go to the Republican Party by over 15 points. Kamala Harris won New Mexico by 6 in 2024. On the Senate level, it went to the Democratic candidate by 10. In 2020, it went to the Democratic candidate by 6 points, while Biden was winning the state by 11 points. It is a solidly Democratic state, just not by 15 points. Democrats aren't going to win the state by 15 points. They'll win it by, I predict, maybe 10, 11, 12 points. And next, the other likely Democratic states are the states of New Hampshire, New Jersey, and Virginia. I meant to make these likely. These states are going to go to the Democratic Party by roughly less than 15 points, but more than 5 points. They're pretty safe for the Democratic Party. I mean, look at the governor level for the states of Virginia and New Jersey. New Jersey went to the Democratic Party on the governor's level by 14 points. On the governor's level in Virginia, it went by over 15 points. It was a safe margin for the Democratic candidates on the governor's level, but I believe in 2026, Democrats are going to slightly underperform their 2025 numbers. I think they're going to come close to winning the states of Virginia and New Jersey by over 15 points, but I just don't think they're going to win these states by that 15-point margin. I don't think they're going to cross over, but they are 100% going to win these states, just not by that 15-point margin. Similar thing goes for New Hampshire. New Hampshire's going to be closer, but the polls we have show it solidly for the Democratic Party, roughly 6, 8, 9, 10-point margin for the Democratic Party, just not that 15-point margin in the other states. And now that brings us to the likely states for the Republican Party. These are states like Kansas and South Carolina, which I talked about earlier, kind of. Not labeling them as safe because I do not think they're going to be won by over 15 points. I think they're going to be won close to 15, maybe 12, 13, 14 points, which is why they're likely states. They're going to be won by the Republicans, just not by 15 points. They're going to be won by less than 15 points, which is why I'm labeling them as likely, of course. And the next likely states for the Republican Party is the state of Florida. Florida is kind of interesting. There's not too much about Florida. Florida in 2024 went to Donald Trump by 13 points, a likely margin. In 2020, it went to Trump by 3 points. In 2016, it went to Trump. It's a reliable Republican state that is shifting to the right. In 2024, Rick Scott won Iowa by 13 points. In 2020, where's the special election? Okay, in 2022, it went to Marco Rubio by 16 points. It's a pretty reliable state for the Republican Party. There's no astronomically amazing Democrat candidate running. It's pretty solidly for the Republican Party, just once again not going to be won by that 15-point margin. And now there's only one state left in the likely column, in my opinion, and that's the state of Iowa. Iowa is very interesting also. It could change, completely dependent on who runs for this Senate race. I just made a video yesterday about how Kari Lake actually might be running for the who might be running for these Senate in the state of Iowa in 2026, or the governor. There is a possibility that she runs. If she does run, Kari Lake, if she runs, then it's going to be very close. Democrats might actually win the state of Iowa, but as of now, there's no amazing Democrat candidate running. There's no terrible Republican candidate running. It's going to be likely for the Republican Party. And that brings us now to the lean states. You might notice there's a lot of states left, and I believe that's how this election is going to go. A lot of states are going to be close. The lean states are states that are going to be won by their respective parties by 1 to 5 points. Below that likely margin, but higher than the tilt margin. The tilt margin we'll get into later. Tilt margin states won by less than 1 point. These are states going to be won by more than 1 point, but less than 5. They're going to be close. These can go either way, but their margins are favorable to one party, but can swing either direction. I'm going to start out for the Democratic Party with the state of Georgia. I believe Georgia is going to be a lean state. In Georgia, on the Senate level, is pretty reliably Democratic. In 2022, it went to Raphael Warnock by 3 points in a red wave year. In 2020, it went to John Ossoff by 1.2 points. John Ossoff is running for re-election. He's winning in every single poll that gets thrown at him. He's raised an obscene amount of money. Where is his fundraising numbers? Um, he has raised $54 million. He has 21 million cash on hand. He is going to cruise to victory in the swing state. He's ahead in all the polls. He's going to win, not by that big of a margin because Georgia is a swing state. It went to Donald Trump by 2 points. It's sometimes a red state, sometimes a blue state. It just completely depends on the candidate. But John Ossoff is the candidate who can make it a blue state. The next lean state is the state of North Carolina. This state, similar, sort of ish, similar to Georgia. Where is it? North Carolina. Former Governor Roy Cooper is running for the state for Senate in the state of North Carolina. He's leading in every single poll by pretty substantial margins, I may add. He's going against Michael Whatley, the RNC chair. He's never held public office. He's just not popular. He has Donald Trump's endorsement, and that's why he's winning the Republican primary. But that's not going to bring him to victory That's not going to bring him to victory against popular former Governor Roy Cooper, who has never lost an election, has been in North Carolina politics for like 4 decades. He's going to easily win this state. Just once again, not by that big of a margin because North Carolina is a swing state, it is a red state. And that is actually it for the lean states for the Democratic Party. What I'm going to do now is move on to the lean states for the Republican Party. The Republicans have more of these than Democrats do. I'm going to start off with the state of Texas. I believe Texas is going to be leaned for the Republican Party. Everyone I see labels Texas as likely, but I do not believe it's going to be likely. I think it's going to be closer than everybody says. This is a very close primary. If Ken Paxton wins this Republican primary, which he is set to do, he's leading in the polls in the Republican primary. He is astronomically weak. He's astronomically unpopular amongst the general electorate. He is extremely far right, very scandal plagued. He is unpopular amongst normal voters. Amongst the Republican base, though, he's popular because of how far right he is, and that is how he's primarying John Cornyn, the incumbent Republican U.S. Senator from the state of Texas, from the right. If he wins this nomination, it's going to put Texas seriously on the table for the Democratic Party in 2026. That is, if James Tallarico wins the Democratic nomination. If Jasmine Crockett wins the Democratic nomination, this race is all but gone for the Democratic Party. Republicans are going to win the state by 5, 10, maybe even more if Jasmine Crockett is the Democratic nominee. But if James Tallarico is the Democratic nominee, he can put up serious numbers against Ken Paxton. Where is it? Yeah. In the few polls that we have, he's tied with Ken Paxton. He's only behind by 3, only behind by 1, and those are polls from months ago. Now that he's got his name out there, he's fundraised. He is popular, and if he is the Democratic nominee and Ken Paxton is the Republican nominee, this state is going to be close. This state, I'm labeling it as lean because Republicans are still definitely favored, but this race could actually swing to Democrats in an upset. The next thing I want to talk about is the state of Nebraska. Nebraska, in my opinion, is going to be a lean state. In a similar scenario to Texas, Nebraska is talked about as being likely for the Republican Party, but I do not believe so. In 2024, this race went to Dan Osborne. Not to Dan Osborne, it went to Deb Fischer against Dan Osborne by less than 7 points. On the same ballot in a red wave year that Donald Trump was winning Nebraska by 21 points. He is very popular, and he is running again in 2026. Let me find this. Hold on, let me find it. 24, 2026, okay. Yeah, in 2026, he's running against Pete Ricketts. Pete Ricketts is a fairly unpopular senator. I actually don't have the numbers up, but there is a recent poll that shows Pete Ricketts with only a +1 approval rating in a solidly Republican state. The few polls that we do have shows this race very close. Shows Pete Ricketts, the Republican incumbent senator, with only a 1-point lead. And one poll, having been behind, has Dan Osborne winning, and Pete Ricketts behind again. Pete Ricketts only up by 1 point again. This is going to be a close state in 2026. This is a state you should really watch for because it is going to be a lot closer than everybody says. Next state for the Republican Party that is lean is the state of Ohio. Ohio is a state. Sherrod Brown is running. The former senator is running against incumbent Senator John Husted. John Husted is fairly popular. Sherrod Brown has a shot at winning, but at the end of the day, John Husted is a fairly typical Republican who bodes well with voters in the state of Ohio. Sherrod Brown will make this race competitive. I'm not saying he won't. I predict it's going to be maybe a 3-point margin for the Republican candidate, similar to his 2024 margin against Bernie Moreno when Sherrod Brown ran 3.6. I predict it's going to be a little bit closer than in 2024, but at the end of the day, I believe John Doucette is going to come out from on top and stay as the senator from the state of Ohio. And now we get into the tilt states. And the first tilt state I want to talk about is the state of Michigan. Michigan is a state that arguably is closer than everybody says. People describe Michigan as a state that is better for the Democratic Party than, in my opinion, it really is. The polls for this race show it very close. It is a tightly contested Democratic primary, so that might be part of it. But the polls, Haley Stevens, the best Democratic candidate, is only ahead in about half the polls. In half the polls, she's behind against Mike Rogers, the presumptive Republican nominee, and that is not a great place to be with the national environment that 2026 is shaping to be. However, this recent poll from Emerson College shows Haley Stevens with a 5-point lead. It also shows another potential Democratic nominee, Mallory McMorrow was a 3-point lead, and Abdul El-Sayed tied. It's going to be a very close race. At the end of the day, I believe that Michigan is going to go to the Democratic Party. I believe the national environment shifting to the left is going to carry whoever the Democratic nominee is over the finish line. I believe this race is going to be extremely close in 2026. In my opinion, the closest race in 2026 as of right now. The next state I want to talk about is the state of Maine. And I believe it's also going to go to the Democratic Party, but by a tilt margin. This race is against Susan Collins versus either Janet Mills or Graham Plattner. We don't really know how this is going to go. It's a tightly contested Democratic primary between the two candidates. It's going to be close no matter what, but I believe, similar to Michigan, I believe that Maine is finally going to unseat Susan Collins. I believe that Maine is finally going to elect a Democratic senator in place of Susan Collins in 2026. No matter how close it may be, I believe, I don't have too much to talk about this, but I think that Susan Collins is going to get unseated, whether it be Janet Mills or Graham Plattner, whoever the Democratic nominee is in the state of Maine. I think they're going to finally unseat Susan Collins and Democrats win this seat. Now we move on to the final race, the state of Alaska. You might say, Alaska, that's a very Republican state. Donald Trump won it by 13 in 2024, and you'd be right. He did win it by 13. It is a red state. And the Senate seat went to Dan Sullivan, the senator who's up for re-election in 2026, went to him by 13 points as well. Alaska's a red state. But, however, Mary Peltola is running for Senate in this state. Mary Peltola is a very popular Democratic candidate. In fact, the only polls that we have from recently, from January, two in January and 2 in October, shows Mary Peltola with a 2-point lead in about every poll in this Senate race. 2 polls, yes, have her behind, but these polls were from July. These polls were from about 6 months ago, before Mary Peltola entered this race, before she was fundraising, before she got her name out there for the Senate race, and she is just getting her name out there. Alaska is going to be extremely close, and in my opinion, is going to be one of the most swingiest swing states in 2026. Honestly, I do not know how to label this. I actually think that Mary Peltola has a slight, and when I say slight, I mean very, very slight edge in this race. Actually, we can pull up, ignore this, I want to pull up Polymarket, actually. Let's see, Mary Peltola. Senate. Mary Peltola in the betting markets is dead even with Dan Sullivan. 51 to 50. It is a 50-50 race. It is going to go either way by less than 1 point, definitely. I think Murabatola is slightly, I mean slightly, favored in this Senate race. I think that the national environment will finally carry Democrats in the state of Alaska only with Murabatola. I cannot stress this enough. Murabatola is the only candidate who can make Alaska competitive in 2026 and is making Alaska competitive after she announced her run for United States Senate. The polls that we have show Murabatola leading. There was also a poll showing Dan Sullivan's, the incumbent senator up for re-election, his approval rating, and it is very negative. He's the third or fourth most unpopular senator in the country. He's unpopular. Murabatola is popular, and I predict that Murabatola is going to unseat him in 2026 and bring the Senate to a 50-50 split in the 2026 midterms. Now, this split will be a majority for the Republican Party. I predict that Republicans are going to keep the Senate majority in 2026, with J.D. Vance being the tiebreaker until 2028. We'll see what happens in 2028. But as of right now, as of February 1st, 2026, I predict that Democrats are going to win the state of Alaska, Michigan, Maine, North Carolina, and Georgia, while losing the states of Texas, Nebraska, and Ohio narrowly to bring the Senate to a 50-50 split. All right, that's enough of my yapping. I've talked about this for way too long. This has been like a 20-minute video. What are your thoughts on this? Who do you think is going to win the Senate in 2026? Do you agree with the Alaska prediction? It's a very bold prediction, I know, because the census is that Dan Sullivan is still favored. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I upload election news every single day. If you enjoyed this video, I encourage you to like the video. It helps out a lot. If you have any video suggestions, I encourage you to drop them in the comments. I'll make a video about it if you comment a suggestion. And yeah, hope you have a great day.